Welcome to SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home. I'm Jenelle Riley of Variety. The SAG-AFTRA Foundation has a COVID-19 relief fund to support SAG-AFTRA performers who are in urgent need during this pandemic. Since March of 2020, the foundation has given over $6.1 million in aid to 6,500 performers and families facing extreme hardship. If you are a SAG-AFTRA member and you need help, please ask. And if you are able to support your community and this crucial effort, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video. And now it is my pleasure to introduce Riz Ahmed from The Sound of Metal. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
I know we usually kick these off because this is primarily an audience of SAG-AFTRA actors by asking about your SAG card. But the last time I asked you, you weren't quite sure which film it was. So I actually want to ask another question, which was, when did you know you wanted to be an actor? Was there a defining moment? Were you someone who grew up watching TV, doing plays?
I'm definitely someone who grew up imitating and acting out movies that I'd seen. The problem was that all the early movies that I saw were kind of ones that I saw through a crack in a door while my uncles were watching things like Nightmare on Elm Street. So they were quite gruesome. I remember some early memories of, Freddy Krueger up to all sorts. But I would kind of be just running around the house with my brother, acting out movies. And I had a little notebook where I'd write down the title of this latest movie. And I made a Kung Fu motorcycle trilogy called Black Dragon. And, and every film I'd act out was an 18. I didn't even record any of these. I'd just be running around the house, just, acting out these stories. So it was something I was doing from a really young age, as my parents remind me, but I never thought of it as something I could really pursue as a profession, quite honestly, because it can be, so unpredictable. As a child of immigrants, I think we were encouraged to look at kind of stable professions. And having said that, when I did decide to try and pursue this, my family, my parents in particular, were very supportive. But the moment of I'm going to be an actor is actually one that I guess it wasn't like that. It was kind of like I made peace with, like, I guess this is the thing I want to do, and that happened incrementally over a long period of time. For a long time, I had trouble describing myself as an actor or an artist. I thought, look, listen, I'm trying this out and hopefully it works out, but tomorrow it might not, and next year it might not. And that continued for some time for me. It's now that I'm more at peace with, like, hey, I think maybe today is the day where I'm saying, I want to be an actor,
Did you have many actors you could look up to growing up? People who looked like you or just
in Bollywood? In Bollywood, yeah, in Bollywood, right? So Amitabh Bachchan, of course, who's, I guess, like Clint Eastwood meets Steve McQueen meets Robert Redford meets, he's the star of all stars, really. Watching his films growing up was, mind-blowing and exciting. Mithun Chakraborty, Amir Khan, Shah Rukh Khan, as well, as I kind of became a bit older. So that was a kind of place you'd go to find people who looked like you, but they were people who weren't necessarily living in reality or behaving like you, or the sensibility of those films was different. So I guess I kind of found my, aspirational, or guess guiding North Star in a kind of Frankenstein way, from like taking the confidence of those faces in Bollywood films, but watching those Scorsese movies and somehow in my mind trying to kind of say, how would that fit? Could that fit together? And wondering if it could.
By the way, I saw something the other day that you've probably seen this a number of times now, but it was a casting call looking for a Riz Ahmed type. So now you're
a type. I didn't see that. Wow. Isn't that what Don Cheadle says? It's like, there's the 5 stages of an actor. Did you hear him say that?
No.
I thought it was fascinating. He was like, stage 1 is, who's Don Cheadle? Stage 2 is, wow.
Get me Don Cheadle?
Yeah, get me Don Cheadle. The next one is, get me a younger Don Cheadle. And the last one is, who's Don Cheadle? Which I thought was amazing. He said that. But wow, okay. If they're looking for a Riz Ahmed type, one step away from a who type.
Well, Or
Damn it.
I believe it was like a USC short film. So if you're available, maybe you should submit.
I'm yes, just to try and kick that ladder up from behind me, make sure I'm not replaced by whoever takes that job.
By the younger Riz Ahmed. So you can currently be seen in The Sound of Metal on Amazon Prime. And this story, people have really fallen in love with this film and your character, Ruben. How did you first become aware of the script? And was there something specific that caught your eye, or was it just an overall good script? You probably read so many. I'm always curious how people get past the first one.
I was blown away by this script. Darius Mardo, who wrote and directed this, and if you believe it or not, it's his first narrative feature film, it's such a bold and distinctive vision. Every creative decision is so considered, so finely honed. The script was the same. It was one that was such an elegant and emotional read. Sometimes you just feel like it's flying through the pages and you're so moved and you well up at the end. It was one of those experiences where you just read it in one sitting and you're just hooked. So then I met with Darius, and so already I was a big fan of the script. I met him. We instantly hit it off. I think we both have a kind of restlessness and a curiosity in us that can sometimes get us into trouble and make us kind of chase our tails and lead us down wormholes and tangents, but also there's those pros and cons of ADD, I guess, where you also kind of intrigued by pursuing every new idea, and so we really hit it off. And the new idea that the shiny object he put in front of me in that meeting, which really captivated me, was this idea of learning the drums for the role and learning sign language. He wanted it to be all for real. And if you watch some of the work he collaborated with Derek Sanfranci on, you get that sense where there's a kind of really finely tuned authenticity to films like Place Beyond the Pines or Blue Valentine. These conditions that Darius was trying to set up where we would live the experience to some extent. So I would spend 7 months learning drums, learning sign language, being immersed in these communities, so that when we were there and we shoot chronologically, we're acting, yes, we're all playing characters, yes, there's a beautiful script, but Darius is trying to create a world around us that can really allow us to jump in head first and live the experience.
Because you're shooting with a lot of deaf or hearing impaired actors, sort of out in the middle of nowhere, like in the movie, how much did your experience sort of mirror Ruben's? Did you come to understand them more in terms of your sign language got better and better during the shoot?
For sure, yeah. I mean, my sign language, I had to get it up to scratch before the shoot because the shoot was only 4 or 5 weeks. So I spent those 7 months getting to certainly conversant, intermittently fluent, kind of ASL level, which was just a joy to learn, a joy to be welcomed into that deaf community. Such a rich culture with that taught me so much. And so in that sense, yeah, Ruben's journey mirrored mine. And that's why Darius cast me, a hearing actor, in that role. Ruben is from hearing culture. We need an actor from hearing culture who's experiencing deaf culture for the first time, just like the character. So it's very considered. And by that same token, as you said, there are many hard of hearing and deaf actors in the film. They're portraying characters who are from deaf culture. So there's an authenticity in that choice. But I'm finding more and more, and I don't know if you speak to so many actors, I wonder if other people say this, which is that I find like the more and more films I do, I'm realizing that the character is teaching you something about yourself. Mm-hmm. And you end up learning the same lesson in your life that the character is learning in the story. And for me, like Ruben, I'm a workaholic. I really love structure, can be a bit of a control freak. And like Ruben, I kind of define myself through my work. And I think, part of Ruben's journey is about letting go of control, letting go of an identity that relies so heavily on the external validation of others through his performance and performances. And I think that was a lesson I needed to learn. My identity isn't tied to what people think of my performances. or the external validation of others. My selfhood is something that I cannot control, something that circumstances are constantly questioning and remaking. I think in a way we all learned a version of that in the pandemic.
I was just going to say, perfect timing.
Mm.
You're also a musician like Ruben, and I have to imagine, I think for most people, but particularly for a musician, the idea of losing one of their senses, of losing their ability to hear, has to be horrifying. I'm sort of curious if there was anything you did to sort of, have some firsthand experience and what that might feel like or sound like.
Yeah, so I mean, as with any role, I kind of did a lot of research, interviewed people, and as I said, Jeremy Lee Stone, my sign instructor, who I named Ruben after, and calling Ruben Stone, really welcomed me into the deaf community, where I was able to learn about some of these experiences alongside reading up on them, and then also when we were on set, we made a decision to use these audio blockers, which were modified hearing aids that emit white noise. And placed them quite deep into my ear canal with the intention of it blocking out, and the result of it blocking out everything, including the sound of my own voice. And that was really, really disorienting. And we only did that for sections of the story where Ruben feels like deafness is a loss and is a lack in his life and is something that's cutting him off from people. When he goes to the deaf community and he starts to realize that deafness is actually not a disability but a culture, a way of being, an opportunity to connect more with himself and others. When we get to that place, we decided not to use audio blockers. And by that point, we were all communicating with in American Sign Language on set, or off camera anyway. So there was, I guess, an attempt to try and glimpse how disorienting that would be.
Was it hard to concentrate? Because there's one thing to have no sound, but to have white noise, I would think it would be really irritating.
Well, the weird thing is white noise is something that ends up becoming background noise, right? That's how it works. So people sleep with fans or vacuum cleaners or washing machines on, right? It reminds us of the womb. So your brain quickly kind of like relegates it into the background, even if it's very loud. It's constant because it's consistent, because it doesn't have new peaks and troughs in it. You're not alerted to it. But it is disorienting just not being able to hear your own voice and hear other people. And, for a hearing person like myself, just in a hearing character like Ruben, it did throw you off balance. But I think another thing it does is it forces you to listen with your whole body. Mm-hmm. There's this saying, I'm sure that SAG members all know, is like, acting is listening. And it's interesting because I feel like the deaf community taught me the true meaning of listening, which is not something you just do with your ears. It's something you do with your attention and your body, and by holding space for someone else's energy. And Jeremy and other deaf actors taught me that, and people in the deaf community taught me that. But when I initially used those audio blockers, it was just disorienting. But then it does force you to kind of be present and listen with your whole body in a different way.
Speaking of Jeremy, am I wrong, or is he's an actor in the film as well?
Jeremy is, yeah. Jeremy plays my sign instructor.
Oh.
Yeah.
Was he cast as an actor first, or was he your instructor?
No, he was my sign instructor, and then he was brought in to act. And there's a lot of that in the film, where you kind of try and create this meta story within the story. So Jeremy kind of, he was just coaching me in ASL for the whole time, and then we said, we think you should be in it,
Wow. And you mentioned when you sat down and had a conversation with Darius Marder, when you're going to be spending so much time with someone, when you're talking to a director, what are the questions you want to ask in those initial meetings? I'm sure it varies from filmmaker to filmmaker, but just as a general rule, what do you sort of want to know about that person?
I guess what I'm looking for, signs of them having a very clear vision, but also being very collaborative and open. It sounds contradictory, but it's not. I think the more confident you are in your vision, the more you can and the more complete your vision is, in a weird way, the more you can welcome people in to live in that world with you and populate that garden with you, if that makes sense. So I think what I saw with Darius very early on was, he's making all these bold decisions. He wants to shoot on film, even if that has time and money consequences. He wants to shoot chronologically. Also, that has those consequences. He wants the actor to learn the drums and to do sign language. Okay, there's no safety net here. He wants to spend 6 months in a sound mix and 6 weeks shooting. Wow, okay, so the sound he's really leaning into this subjective sound design. And then I'm on set and I've got the sound designer placing kind of hexagonal microphones, orbs against my chest and asking me to blink and swallow and lick my lips so that they can create a soundscape for the film that consists of my internal bodily vibrations and noises, so you feel like you're in Ruben's head, experiencing and hearing what he is. And so I just saw someone who's so bold, but also so warm, so inviting for you to bring yourself to this, to a role. So encouraging, he's someone who really leads with a bold vision and leads with love. Sometimes you meet people who might get a bit of a kick out of being dictators on set, and that's just not his energy. So it just instantly kind of, fell in love with him, really.
It seems like you're probably in a position now where you don't have to audition as much as you did in the beginning. I'm guessing you probably haven't auditioned for a while, if you're able to take meetings like this. But going back to, sort of when you were starting out, is there any helpful advice you could offer actors who are, auditioning for projects, who are going through that process? What sort of helped you during that time?
Yeah, I was terrible at auditioning, and I'm very grateful to be able to do it a little less now. But I still had to send in, tapes, and it's an interesting one because this isn't something that I put into practice. But if I look to look back, I would say that the issues with auditioning, I think, can be the same issues that can block you in a scene on stage or in a film, which is if you're too result focused. If I do a scene thinking I want to make the audience cry, or I want the audience to like me, or I hope the director likes this, I'm not able to be present and just trust the process and surrender to the process and let it happen. I'm too result oriented. And I think that's what can happen in auditions. You can be thinking about, man, what's the result of this going to be? How am I being perceived and assessed? I want to achieve this result here, and with that director or casting director, or knowing what I'm doing with the scene, because it's such a small sliver of yourself you get to give. I think there can be the temptation to kind of give a lot rather than get out of the way and let things happen. And it's understandable. That's why I was always terrible at it. But I guess that the same thing that can put you in a state of flow on set or on stage, which is a feeling of surrender, a feeling of submission to the river that's running through the scene and is going to carry you and your scene partner wherever it is. I think that might be helpful in auditions as well, but of course it's difficult because auditions are so result oriented. You have to hit target, which means getting the job. So
I'm curious what it's like, especially working on something like Sound of Metal, where Ruben has such a journey and there are so many emotional scenes. And when you're working on an independent film too, you probably don't have much time. So if you have to prepare to go out and, I know you're trying not to be too results focused, but you're also first on the call sheet and you have a certain responsibility. If there's certain scenes that, you feel pressure to get right, if there's a way you prepare, if you need to be alone, if you listen to music, sort of how you ramp yourself up for the big emotional scenes.
Yeah, it's a great question, because I feel like it changes from job to job. And I think my thinking has evolved on this. I think sometimes I will kind of step away from everyone and listen to music. But what I find increasingly is that I end up kind of incubating myself from the world in a fragile bubble of emotion that I can't allow to be burst by other directors or actors. And I'm kind of wallowing in a sense of feeling. And then in a scene, I can end up kind of just being a bit of a vibe beacon rather than being someone who's trying to achieve something. And so I still might kind of turn to music or memories or personal effects or photos to kind of trigger to soften me up, but I'm not trying to maintain that emotional bubble and when I'm walking to set anymore. That's something that opens me up to what's going on right now. And so increasingly I'm just finding, and it's a lesson that I have to learn and relearn, is to like get out of the way. Don't try and control it. Be an open channel. And then the river will come. The flow will come. But it's scary because to turn up, it's like turning up and saying, hey, listen, just turn up on stage naked. I promise you clothes will magically appear. But of course, you're not completely naked. You have to trust that you've done enough work that your body knows. Your body has a memory. Your body has developed an association. So if you can just do a little something, whatever you need to do to like just tenderize yourself a little bit, that when you step into the oven, I'm sorry, garbling a metaphor here, John Turturro said, which is tenderize the meat and just put it in the oven. So if you tenderize yourself, in my slightly gruesome remix of that metaphor, now I'm stepping into the oven to cook myself. But if you just do what you've got to do to kind of open up a little bit, then step in empty, try and have the confidence and the faith, really. It's hard. I think acting is a spiritual endeavor. Have the faith to step in empty and believe that the situation and the partner and everything that will fill you, that will carry you. It's hard to remind myself of that, rather than coming in with baggage and tension and energy I'm trying to preserve. That almost always ends up being not the way.
What was the most challenging part of playing Ruben, or your toughest scene?
I mean, different scenes are difficult in different ways. And so what I find is that the drumming scene was quite nerve-wracking and difficult from a technical point of view, learning to play the drums, doing it in a real club and doing it for real, not wanting to look like an idiot. I actually discovered the day before we shot that scene that I was doing a weird thing with my face when I was playing the drums every time. Because every time my drum teacher would film me from behind over my shoulder. So the day before, we went into a new studio and we moved to Boston for this. And he films me from head on. And every time I'm drumming, I'm going like a kind of metronome. And I'm like, why didn't anybody tell me this? Like, we thought you knew. Like, I thought it was an acting choice. I'm like, that's not an acting choice, dude. That's my face being crazy. So I had to kind of spend all of that scene trying not to gurn my jaw. So that was challenging in its own technical way, I guess, with drumming and stuff. Other things kind of are challenging because that in the story it's an emotional scene. And as I said, it's about trying to rise to that occasion by weirdly getting out of the way of it, which is always tricky to convince yourself to do, but I inevitably find that the trickiest scenes that you look back and go, I wish I could do that again, or they'll go badly, are the ones you never see coming, are the ones that are like, this is just a scene where you walk across here and open a door and you notice this thing. Those are always the ones that like kind of go, you kind of forget, what am I doing? What do I want? And you kind of overlooked it, and somehow the moment feels false, feels like you're going through the motions. Those are always the sneaky ones for me that I kind of end up going, damn, what was I doing in that?
I'm so invested in this character. But what I'm really curious about is, that shot with Ruben sort of sitting in public and he turns his implants off. And there's been some discussion about what that shot, how he's feeling in that moment. Like, is he enjoying the silence? Is it a sad moment? Is it a triumph? I'm sort of curious what your read was.
I think it's about acceptance for me. A lot of people read acceptance as meaning giving up. A lot of people think of it as surrender, which can have positive and negative connotations. A lot of people see it as the step towards, first step towards change. I think it's a step towards acceptance, and I think that the trickiest thing to do is to meet yourself. Once you've met yourself, you really see yourself, to accept yourself, and then from that maybe to love yourself. And I think that's Ruben's journey, is one where when we meet him, he's really running away from himself. He's designed his life so he doesn't have to sit still on his own. He's always with Lou. He's always controlling his environment. He's always on the go. He's always obsessively working and creating, performing. And when he has the mask of performance, the structure of his routine, the sanctuary of his motorhome, the crutch of his girlfriend taken away from him, he's forced to sit with himself, to meet himself. It's difficult. And I think that for me, it's a step towards accepting that things aren't going to go back to how they were. How they'll be going forwards, I don't know. But yeah, so that's kind of what I kind of glean from it as a lesson for me as an audience member, you know.
Acceptance. See, it's funny. I use the word surrender in a good sense, that he was,
Yeah, but not everyone does, you know.
Yeah, but acceptance is a much better word. That's what I will use going forward. And we have to talk about this film's amazing cast. I'm so thrilled to see Paul Raci getting so much love, as both you and him have been picking up Critics Awards throughout the year. He's so fantastic in the movie. Olivia Cooke, who you share so many scenes with. It's just from top to bottom, the cast is phenomenal. And it feels like it was a really supportive environment.
It was like a little family, you know, with Darius as our kind of foster father, just kind of like guiding us through this journey, as I said, with parameters that were really painstakingly authentic and lived in, so that we were kind of living through some of these situations, albeit with his, like, you know, finely crafted script. It was a beautiful experience. You know, when I finished this film, I said, I don't care if anyone ever sees this. This has been transformative and so enriching. I think a lot of us felt the same way. And as I said, I think the deaf community taught me, and these deaf actors taught me what true listening is. Like I said, it's listening with your whole body, and what true communication is, which is embodied communication, not just words and skull, you know, but communicating with your whole body, which is what you're forced to do in ASL. And so I really hope that, you know, producers and audiences see these actors, particularly deaf actors, and say, we want to see more of them. You know, these people aren't talented despite their deafness. It's because of their deafness they can have this unique set of tools and have so much to give that we're just missing out on. And just to speak to Olivia and Paul for a moment, Olivia Cooke is just incredible, you know, young British actress who's like, she just can do it all, and she can do it all on the turn of a penny. And you know what? She's so cool. She's so fun and sweet and funny. It's like she does not take herself seriously at all. She's constantly cracking jokes on set, and then the cameras roll and she's just in it and she's sobbing, and it was a joy to work with her. And Paul, you know, he's this way he describes it himself is, I spent 35 years as a day player coming to do, you know, one scene on one day in a project, and this is the first time he's got to play a role on screen that goes beyond that, and where he can bring himself and all that tremendous talent and life experience and wisdom to a role. So I just feel like, you know, we've all struck gold. We've discovered this incredible, monumental actor that was hidden from us, that would have been like kind of lost to us at the age of 70, has come in and gone, wow, that's something. So I'm so excited for him. It was such a pleasure working with him. He was a bridge on set between the deaf and hearing communities, because he himself was raised by deaf parents. So he was like a bridge in terms of communication and all kinds of things.
I used to see him in theater in town. He did a lot with deaf.
Really?
Yeah. So it's always a thrill to see somebody go from like a 40-seat black box theater to a big, awesome movie.
That's huge. Yeah. And so well deserved. And, you know, he he has that soulful energy, you know, that Joe has. And he was just so generous with it on set. He was just so open, just so young at heart.
Yeah.
In a way. Yeah.
I can't believe he's 70. When you said that, that's floors me. You've had such an interesting career, and you do these independent films, and then you also do some big budget movies, but they're really good, like Rogue One and Venom. Even I love Venom. Like they have big budgets and they're blockbusters, but they're really great movies. I'm sort of curious what draws you to a project. Is it the script, the director, a combination of all of the above?
I try and think about where I might grow and learn the most. You know, obviously, you just kind of also think about where you're at, where your curiosity lies, and creatively, what kind of way, you know, your itch is. So that's one thing. But also, I try and look at things in terms of growth. And you know, at a time when I was doing Rogue One and Born, and I had never done a studio movie until Rogue One. I'd been working for 15 years at that point, and so, 10 years, and had been doing more kind of indie movies. And so to me, that was just like, I want to do as many of these bigger films as possible for a while, so I can understand the process and the machine of it all, and how you can carve out a space to be creative within that, and understanding the nuances of that. You know, what kind of collaboration that is, how it's a slightly different kind of collaboration to an indie movie. That forces you to develop more technical skills, actually. You're waiting around more. They're longer shoots. You know, you've got to give them this option, that option, and that option. You've got to hit your marks in a different way. So I'm really glad to have done a lot of those, but I did it because I thought I'd grow and learn a lot by going there. And I think at the time when I took on Sound of Metal, I was looking for something that could kind of overwhelm me, so that I could finally learn to kind of let go a bit more of control, to do lots and lots of prep, and be overwhelmed by how daunting that might be, but then be on set and be emotionally overwhelmed. And I kind of feel like up until that point, I feel like there was still an element of my work that was still a bit me kind of controlling it a bit. And I think now what I'm trying to lean more into is being very, very rigorous and prepared, like crazy, but then, you know, like I said, turning up naked a little bit rather than with all these like fancy tricks and toys. And so that was a kind of a stage of growth and learning that I wanted to kind of explore.
And you get to be an action figure, which is, you know, something that not every actor gets to do.
Yeah, I mean, what a privilege, man, to be part of that amazing kind of story world that means so much to so many people. So yeah, super grateful for that.
Well, I want to remind everyone that Sound of Metal, I'm always afraid I'm going to call it Sound of Music. Forgive me. Sound of Metal is now available on Amazon Prime. You can watch it again and again. And on behalf of the SAG-AFTRA Foundation, we just want to thank you for joining us and for sharing your experience, process, and craft. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Jenelle. Thanks everyone who's tuned in.